Hello, my name's Jorb. I love gear, and today I'm talking about the Moog Sub 37. It occurred to me as I go through the normal cycle of buying and selling gear, I normally come out with a pretty complete set of thoughts as to what I do and don't like about an individual piece of kit. And this is the first episode where I'm going to try and get those thoughts out. So this is going to be a slightly snappy sharing of my long-term impressions and details that led to my decision to part with an individual piece of gear. And today's episode, this is why I'm selling the Moog Sub 37. So let's start with very simply, why did I buy it in the first place? If now I don't feel like I'm going to keep it. Well, I'd seen them on stage and in videos constantly, and I really wanted to know if the hype and praise was actually founded. I like the idea of a good-sized key bed and a good-sized unit in general that was dedicated to being a monosynth. I like the idea of synths that have a specific role. And I wanted a second monosynth. I had one for bass and one for leads. Of course, they would alternate, but they could only ever be that because they're only monophonic. I bought into the hype around the expressive modulation, and that's something that really the way I like to sit and design sounds. It sounded like it would work for me, and I recently ended up with a Mod 32 in a trade, and I wasn't completely blown away, and I wanted to see if I wasn't impressed with Moog, or I wasn't impressed with the Mother 32, or the problem was I wasn't into Eurorack at the time. I'm using a DoD rubberneck for some delay in the intro and throughout. If you already subscribed, thank you. Most of you aren't, and if you aren't, chances are you found this by searching. Here's the numbers on that. In my eyes, if you found this by searching, if you subscribe now, guess what? You don't have to search for it next time. It'll just show up for you. Clearly you like it, right? Okay, I hate saying that. So what is good about it? A ton. The sounds are absolutely there. Anyway, their sounds are definitely there. The build quality, which everybody will tell you is as good as it gets, is actually as good as it gets. The knobs absolutely feel premium. The chassis is sleek and sturdy. The shape is interesting, if not that practical. Excuse me. The faceplate is like one solid sheet of printed plastic, and I would see that as like a cost-cutting measure and not etched metal or anything, but it's textured like in a way that feels nice. Everything's perfectly centered. It doesn't like push up anywhere. It's glued over the whole thing, so it's all of those things. I think it's absolutely not a cost-cutting measure. I think it's a decision and it looks good. Sound-wise, the things it lets you do that you can't do on a lot of things, or that it certainly does well. Let's get to an initialized patch here. A feature that I think is not worth overlooking. The mixer's overdriving past 50%. Awesome feature. So let's do triangle. We can really hear it drive. That's 50%. There it is all the way up. Saturating in a way. Anyway, the sound is absolutely there. And speaking of overdrive options, multi-drive sounds good. And the feedback sounds great. Just feedback now. Oscillator over 50. Turn it down again. Multi-drive. Turn it down again. think that's essential to the sound and the character of the Sub 37 and what makes it cool and interesting. Great overdrive options are all right there, very easy to get to. And just to generally talk about that, everything is so hands-on. The travel of every knob is perfect. The range that they give you is exactly the usable range you'd want. My only complaint as to that probably would be pitch modulation. I feel like pitch modulation is way too sensitive. So this is... I might have to zoom in and show you this. Okay, we're scoped way in. You can see my finger here on mod 2. So there's none right now. And if I just barely touch it, that's already kind of a lot, let alone what you get at 50 and 100%. And same thing for the negative. Filter's kind of like that, but a pitch is way worse. I wish the range of that was a little more precise. That is a nitpick. So still talking about controls, some of the really interesting things that are available that I want to highlight. It's so easy to point your modulation sources to one or both oscillators, or any of your modulators, or set your LFOs to sync or reset with keyboard press. And actually, same thing with the oscillators, the keyboard reset, where the fresh wave starts every time you hit a key. All the options beneath the envelopes are hugely appreciated. Reset, sync, loop, latch on, things like that. I love having that just one button. Let me see what that sounds like. Let me see what that sounds like. A lot of those options, if they are available on other keyboards, are going to be behind menus. And things like the mixer, again, just being able to click stuff on and off, I love it. And the way the buttons work, because they light on or off as they change, it's not like a positional switch, right? So when you change patches, it'll jump to a different light. See, here we've got different stuff on each of these. You can immediately see where you're at. You don't have to flip the switch and try and match it. Sure, you have some of that on the oscillators, but that is not as much of a problem as figuring out what's going on. You should be able to hear for the most part. Big stuff like that. So all that said, it sounds like I like it. Why am I thinking about getting rid of it? Well, for the sounds I'm using it for, I don't need to have something that costs more than $1,000. And I find myself using it less often than a lot of other stuff, which is just... that doesn't tell you anything, okay? It's just what ended up happening to me. But I think it's because for normal bread and butter synth-based stuff sound, I prefer the ARP Odyssey that I've already got. I don't know if it's because it doesn't have presets. I don't know if it's because it has faders, whatever. I find myself gravitating towards that a lot more. Maybe because it's a little simpler in the terms of what you can and can't do, and I just get to the simple bass stuff without any of the other shenanigans. And then speaking of the shenanigans, I don't use the ARP in the sequencer at all. I do all my sequencing with an MPC 1000. Sorry, so that doesn't matter. Those features don't end up getting used for me. And I've got one kind of a big complaint about modulation, and I don't know if this is going to resonate with anybody else or if it's just going to be me with a really weird beef, okay? So I'm going to go on. I wrote a lot of it down. I'm going to read through it. Okay, a lot of people might see this as a weird, unfair beef, but it really bothers me. The way modulation works on the Sub 37, there are 2 modulation buses, okay? And those buses are 1 source, 3 destinations, 2 are fixed, 2 pitch and filter amount, and a whole bunch of controllers. And a controller attenuates it. So think of the mod wheel. The mod wheel can bring in the amounts that you have set on the panel, right? So as I move the mod wheel up, any of these will go from 0 all the way up to where I set them. That's what controllers do. But if you want to use a source that's not your LFO, you give up the use of that LFO. And I guess what do I mean by that? So if I change the program source here to constantly on, I'll give you an example of why I would do that. You see the rate up here? That's our modulation rate. It's just constantly on now. And we have movement from the other ones. So mod 2 is constantly on, okay? I'm going to set it to the filter amount. Filter's down. I can now use this on the filter, or if I go into controllers, and I set mod wheel to 100%, I can use the mod wheel to open me up to that point. Or if I want to use velocity to do anything, or aftertouch, or one programmed source. You can't use more than one LFO if you're using any source that's not an LFO. Does that kind of make sense? I don't know if it did. So even though I can send this to 3 destinations, right? Let's make it the wave of oscillator 1 and its pitch and its filter. So I can move all those at once with the mod wheel, but I don't really want to do that often. Okay? Does that make sense? Am I crazy? Or if I want to use velocity, or if I want to use one of the envelope generators to change the wave or the filter. Sorry, the filter is not a good example. Or the pitch or the wave or any of the program sources, then I've given up the use of one of my LFOs. Why does it have to be that way? And I can't think of a good comparison, okay? Because I can't think of anything else that does modulation like this. If you think of it like a row-based mod matrix, okay, like you see on the DeepMind and the Prophet 12, I think, and like the Blofeld, you do have a lot of power in terms of like you get a bunch of rows, if you want to think of it like that, because you can do so many controllers, and they can be different amounts each. Velocity, aftertouch, the programmed one in the mod wheel, can be different positive and negative amounts. Attenuating, 3 targets, let's call them targets. So 3 targets modulated by 4 controllers, that's already 12 rows in a mod matrix, right? But how often do you want to do that? How often do you want to modulate together your pitch, your filter at all, first of all, or a third thing, especially 3 things at a time? I'm not so sure. Is that is that complaint only me? I hope it's not. I really want to know. So I got to stop talking about the mod buses. I cut myself off somewhere. What I would really like to see is these programmable destinations work somewhere else or have a traditional mod matrix somewhere. Even if it takes a little bit of menu diving, please. That would have been so much better for me. Because giving up an LFO to do interesting things with velocity or point the envelopes in somewhere other than where they're hardwired, to me is essential to a synth being expressive. And I'm not saying that Sub 37 isn't, but you don't have as many options as I thought I would have with a very modern, very expensive, marketed on modulation.
You have something that's a lot like a very well-specified tiny modular synth all in one convenient package.
I guess I just didn't understand, or I wasn't ready for that to be as limiting as it is to me in the way I want to make sound. Because with something that's big and evolving and complicated and has a lot of these excellent options, why can't I have like 2 LFOs and 2 of those program destinations? Is that unreasonable? I don't think so at all. If that's just me, let me know. If you don't have a problem with that, or it doesn't limit you at all, then cool. But this is what I put in the comments. Fuck. So I know they're finicky, but I think they're reasonable for what is it, a top of the market product. I'm not gonna talk about the mod buses anymore. I'm getting worked up. I'm gonna try and wrap this up. I've had the Sub 37 for a long time. I learned it pretty well. It feels great. The build quality is perfect. I talked about how much I like the controls, the way they work, what's available, how comfortable they feel, how usable the entire travel of every knob feels. The options for overdriving make the synth really sound exceptional, but I end up using it for traditional synth sounds, synth bass sounds a lot of the time because the modulation options don't work the way I want them to, and I don't care for the sequencing. I cannot justify holding onto something that's worth like $1,000 more than a base station 2 when I could get 80% of the way there with a base station 2 or something else. It doesn't have to be that. A mini log, in a lot of ways, almost could probably do what I need to do. The Mofo from Dave Smith, which that might be what replaces this for me. There's no reason for me to have a $1,500 monosynth that I do $200 monosynth jobs for. And that's just me. I'm not saying you're wrong for keeping it. If you are, and if you have one and you are, I'm not saying you're wrong for thinking it's worth the money. For my use case and my preferences, it just didn't nail it. I wish that it did, because it looks fantastic and it feels fantastic. It is just cool, but if it doesn't work for me, it doesn't work for me, and I'm not going to fight that. So, and this is another minor complaint. The hard case is fucking huge. The closest thing I have in size is a guitar amp, my 1x12. Anyway, that's another complaint. So there you have it. It feels great. I love it. I just can't justify it. I really wish I could. My name's been Jorb. I love gear. even the stuff I sell. This has been the Sub 37. I might do a couple more things with it before I let it go, but it's getting packed up pretty soon. So appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.